October 1993. The streets of Moscow roar with protests, gunfire echoes, and tanks roll ominously toward the White House. It's not a quiet day in politics, it's a fight for the future of Russia. A nation fresh from the collapse of the Soviet Union, still wobbling under its weight, suddenly finds itself on the verge of civil war. This is Black October. A moment when Russia's fate hung by a thread and its leaders were locked in a brutal standoff. It's a story of power, ambition, and bullets, where Boris Yeltsin, Russia's first president, faced off against a rebellious parliament. The battlefield? Not a distant front, but Moscow itself. By 1993, Russia was more chaos than country. The Soviet Union had collapsed just 2 years earlier, and the people were left stunned. President Boris Yeltsin promised a bold future, free markets, democracy, and a break from the past, but reality didn't match the dreams. Instead of prosperity, Yeltsin's reforms threw Russia into economic turmoil. Shock therapy, they called it. Rapid privatization, free market policies, all designed to make Russia a capitalist state overnight. And what did it create? Hyperinflation, a plummeting economy, and factories closing across the nation. Unemployment soared. The ruble was worth less than the paper it was printed on. Many felt Yeltsin had sold Russia's soul to the West, betraying the promises of a better life. And then, the parliament started to push back hard. The Supreme Soviet, still run by old guard communists and nationalists, saw Yeltsin's reforms as a disaster. They accused him of destroying the country. Yeltsin, in turn, saw them as relics of a failed past. By 1993, it was clear this wasn't just a disagreement. This was a showdown. On September 21, 1993, Yeltsin made his move. He signed Decree No. 1400, dissolving the parliament. In his eyes, the old system had to go if Russia was ever going to move forward. Parliament wasn't going to give up so easily, so it declared the decree illegal. They voted to impeach Yeltsin, appointed Alexander Rotskoy as acting president, and barricaded themselves inside the White House, the parliament building. So now Russia had 2 presidents, 2 governments, and a crisis brewing that wasn't going to end peacefully. Moscow became a city divided. Tens of thousands rallied in support of the parliament, waving flags of the Soviet Union. Others, loyal to Yeltsin, were determined to see the old guard swept away. Tensions escalated and violence loomed. October 3rd, the day Moscow caught fire. Opposition protesters stormed the streets, breaking through police lines, seizing weapons, and calling for Yeltsin's head. They headed straight for the Ostankino TV tower, the heart of state-run media. Controlling the media meant controlling the narrative, and the rebels wanted to broadcast their message to the nation. But Yeltsin wasn't about to let that happen. Soldiers were sent to secure the tower, and what started as a protest quickly turned into a bloodbath. Armed militants supporting the parliament clashed with the police and military. Bodies fell in the streets, blood mixing with the echoes of gunfire. The violence was spreading, and Yeltsin knew that if he didn't act fast, Moscow would burn. His solution? Tanks. The next day, October 4th, Moscow woke up to the sound of tank engines. Yeltsin ordered the military to surround the White House. He wasn't just going to wait them out, he was going to crush them. T-80 tanks rolled into position and aimed their barrels at the Parliament building. For hours, they blasted the White House, reducing its once pristine marble facade to rubble. The parliamentarians inside huddled in darkened hallways as the walls shook and windows shattered. The siege was brutal, and no one could have expected to see this kind of violence in the heart of Russia's capital, right next to the Moscow River. Eventually, Yeltsin's forces stormed the building. Soldiers, armed and ruthless, fought their way through barricades, gunfire, and rebels. Rotskoy, Kazbulatov, and their followers were arrested. The coup was over. But the cost? Over 150 people dead, more than 400 wounded, and Moscow in a state of shock. Yeltsin stood triumphant, but the victory came with a bitter aftertaste. The very image of Russian tanks shelling the seat of their own parliament stunned the world. This was supposed to be the new democratic Russia, but it looked more like a war zone. With the parliament subdued, Yeltsin wasted no time consolidating his power. In December 1993, he pushed through a new constitution. The result? a presidency with almost unchecked power. Parliament's influence was crushed, and Yeltsin stood as the uncontested leader of Russia. The constitution remains in place to this day, giving future presidents, including Vladimir Putin, the kind of authority Yeltsin fought for. But Black October left scars that went far beyond constitutional changes. The divide between those who supported Yeltsin's reforms and those who longed for a return to Soviet ideals deepened. Russia's experiment with democracy survived the crisis, but at what cost? Yeltsin's legacy became tainted by the violence he had unleashed to stay in power, and for many Russians, trust in the political system was forever shaken.